I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Chris. All right, and if you all have board book open, again, I will do my very best to lead through this, but if you have other places you want to navigate to, you are welcome to not follow the leader. And we are starting with our board business, and specifically, we have a proclamation for Hispanic Heritage Month that Vice Chair Thompson is going to read.
Okay. Let me get to that. Proclamation recognizing Hispanic Heritage Month. Whereas Greater Albany Public Schools recognizes that the Hispanic and Latinx people contribute to our nation's success. They serve in the military and as educators, attend schools across America, and strengthen the economy. And whereas the Latinx heritage of the United States extends over 5 centuries, and whereas Spanish, Mexican, and indigenous cultures were established in this region before Oregon obtained statehood, and whereas the United States has a history of welcoming immigrants and the school board affirms that tradition, and whereas 22% of our students and 8% of our staff identify as Hispanic and Latinx, and whereas the school board is committed to creating pathways for Hispanic employees to have more equitable representation, and whereas the school board supports providing opportunities for our Hispanic, Latinx, and immigrant students to partner and celebrate their cultures, and whereas our schools honor and preserve the linguistic and cultural assets of students through enrichment programs such as dual language, Latinos Unidos AOS, and advanced placement courses that help the development and enrich the diverse backgrounds of our heritage Spanish speakers while exposing non-Spanish speakers to diverse multilingual and multicultural perspectives. And whereas our community is strengthened by the support and advocacy from organizations like the LBCC Hispanic Advisory Committee and the City of Albany Human Relations Commission, and whereas the school board has affirmed its position of being a safe and welcoming school district and seeks to join with our community in embracing the talents and contributions of all residents, and whereas the school board commits to creating successful educational outcomes for Hispanic, Latinx, and immigrant students, now therefore, the Greater Albany Public School Board of Directors proclaims September 15th to October 15th to be Hispanic Heritage Month and encourages all members of our community to join in celebration of our Hispanic, Latinx, and immigrant students.
Thank you, Vice Chair Thompson. I saw hands clapping and appreciation of having this. I think it's great. I know it's a difficult time of year when we're all, doing things virtually and remotely, but if there are opportunities for us to join in any events or things that are happening online, it would be wonderful to know about those that are happening, especially as it relates to our students and faculty and school related things. So anything pops up, let us know. We will definitely support them all. Thank you for that. I think our next, one thing I had a note, Director Thompson, I don't know if your microphone can be increased a little bit in volume. It sounded like there were a couple people having a hard time hearing you. Okay. So if you have an opportunity to look at that, that'd be great. And I only say that because I know you have things to read later too, so.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, and then next steps for our equity training, the board had our first equity training and it went really well. We had some great information that we learned. And I know that Elaine is scheduling some individual meetings, I think with each one of us. She's probably reached out already if you, hopefully you've heard from her. And she will be chatting with each one of us so we can ask our own specific questions and get some more information from her. And then we will be following up again at our retreat, and then we'll have some follow-up meetings with her in addition to that. We also had the district purchased the book that was mentioned in her training called Courageous Conversations, which I agree is a great read and very simple. And so starting on Wednesday of this week, those will be available at the district office for the board members to pop in and pick up a copy of. So you can each have a copy to read. And Chris, were you able to verify that there were enough copies for our student board members as well? Is she still on? Yes, there are. Okay. So for both of our student board members, there's copies of that book that will be at the district office for you to pick up as well. I'm assuming, Chris, maybe you can send an email out to them and let them know if you're putting them in our boxes, where those are for our student board members or where you'll have them for them to grab. Okay. Thank you. All right. Any other comments or questions or thoughts about the equity training next steps? Anything I'm missing? Nope. All right, so we are on to our superintendent update.
Thank you so much, Board Chair Butzner and other board members, student board members. I'd like to welcome LJ Carmichael, our newest student board member from West. Hey, LJ, so happy to have you and Esperanza, both a part of the team. Really glad to have your voices here. And just as your superintendent, I would encourage you to use those voices as student board members. I think you have the ear closest to the ground, as they say. So it's really important to hear your perspectives. Board members, I'd like to just give you a couple highlights from the superintendent's update. I'm sure you have read it, but just in case you have not, or for those who are viewing, I'll speak a bit about the metrics in a moment, but I did want to let you know that our registration of students continues to climb. We have more students today than we had as of the report on September 23rd, which was 9,154 students. Remember that our budget was based on 9,300 students. We are finding ourselves right within that 100 mark of student enrollment, which is quite good considering that we have many districts across the state that are seeing enrollment that has gone down markedly. We are about, at one point we were about 3% below enrollment projections, and now we're finding ourselves climbing much closer to even. So we're pleased with that. Our final enrollment numbers happen October 1st. So you will see at your next board report, you will have kind of our final enrollment numbers as far as what the state considers enrollment. So you'll have that information soon. There is a little bit of an update regarding childcare and enrichment opportunities. We are still waiting to hear from the county commissioner group of community members regarding where those investments have been made across the community, and we're excited to be able to partner with those organizations who are able to have things stand up for kids. I know that one of the first round interviews that was approved had to do with water activities, and they have reached out to us to see what partnership we might be able to do. So that we are pleased to see that. A note, and we have talked to the board and we talked about this at our equity retreat last week, but just to remind the board that the State Board of Education did pass an administrative rule, a temporary rule 2 weeks ago, banning 3 different hate symbols from any school campuses. And those symbols are the swastika, the Confederate flag, and the noose. and those symbols are not allowed on any school properties in any way, shape, or form. And it doesn't matter if it's a student or an adult or a guest on campus. So those rules went into effect immediately following the approval by the board. So those are currently in effect on our campuses. And those folks who are working on campus will receive information, including the contractors, more direct information regarding what that may mean for themselves. So we're trying to communicate that broadly with folks. We know that those symbols have no place on our school campuses. They instill fear. They are designed to instill fear and designed to propagate anger and conflict. And we are pleased and supportive of the move that the state board has taken there. So now I'm going to move on to the next item under the update, which is around the metrics. So we are now exactly 3 weeks out from our targeted, hoped for opening of October 19th to kindergarten through 3rd grade students. We let our community know that our first real opportunity that we saw as possible was going to be October 19th. It's important to note, and actually I'm going to ask Andrew, oh, Rachel's already on. I have our district health coordinator, Rachel Smith, here on the call with us to help answer questions. But I wanted to let you know where we are currently with the metrics. So we know that we need to have fewer than 30 cases per 100,000 to even consider having K-3 student, kindergarten through 3rd grade students attend school. And to do that, we would need an exception from the state for them to attend school. Now, we do have a number of students who are attending and receiving instruction in a limited in-person basis. And what that means is that there were specialized learning areas that we needed to focus on with those students. And they are allowed to be at school for 2 hours or fewer per day, and no more than 2 hours. And there needed to be a specific reason for bringing them onto campus, and those groups have to be extremely small as well. So we cannot, for example, bring everybody in for 2 hours a day because we can't cut students up into that many different groups. So limited in person is really just for targeted specific needs for small groups of students. So we have been doing that. What we are now wanting to do is look toward when can we bring kinder, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade students onto campus for hybrid learning, in-person instruction. And because of the metrics that were released today, actually just this afternoon, it is clear that we will not be able to do that for more than 3 weeks, for at least 3 weeks. So today's data in both Benton and in Lynn County surpasses that 30 per 100,000 marker. In Benton County, for the last week, we had, 36 per 100,000 within the Benton County community. And remembering that Albany and Greater Albany Public Schools, our district spans across both counties. So we need both counties in order to open all of our schools. We need both counties to meet. And then in Lynn County, that data was 43.5 per 100,000. And remember that at 30, you no longer have any options for any exceptions. So we are actually looking at our limited in-person offerings as well, and how data could be impacted by that.
Oh, real quick. I think when you have a second, Director Eastman also had a question.
Oh, thank you.
So,
sure. Director Eastman, now is a great time for the question.
So if we were to get to a position where Lynn County did get in line, and I noticed in the report today that we can tell by zip code where the like, I hesitate to use the word the infection rate, but where the population is, can appeal to the Board of Education and say, look, this is being affected by outside of our area, so we could look at a 97321 and figure out, I don't know if they can figure out whether the Benton County, Lynn County line, but I'm just wondering if there was a chance that we could, like some of the Eastern Oregon schools, they've proven that since they're isolated, et cetera, and I think you understand what I'm getting at.
Yeah, I do. And I think that's particularly a potential point of conversation when we look at Benton County and this part of North Albany being a fairly segregated part of Benton County, much more difficult in the Lynn County areas that serve gaps as a school district, because we have students across so many of those different regions. Also to note, we also have staff across those different areas. So one of the things we were talking about today is, even if you looked at a part of a county and looked at that part of the county being okay, the teachers who teach at that school may not be from that county at all, and their children may go to school in some of those other areas that are more impacted. And how do we manage the dance that's created there? So yes, short answer is yes, we can definitely look at that. And if there are opportunities to ask ODE to take an exception approach, we could certainly do that. And I would not discourage us from looking at that avenue. Unfortunately, right now, with the rates as high as they are, I don't see any pathway for the state to be thinking that they would be providing us an exclusion. Now, we are working on this public service announcement in conjunction with other Lynn County school districts and the county commissioners and the Y and Boys and Girls Club. Andrew has been working on that, and I thank him for the work he's done on that thus far. We will be sending that out over social media and kind of in any way that we can, and appreciate any help that you have in spreading that information. Rachel, do you have any additional info on the approach of the zip code data that Director Eastman asked about?
I think the zip code one is a really valid one to think through. The hardest part is going to be breaking down those numbers in terms of the new cases per week and how the county would do that. Another factor that we have to consider with any of our exceptions and our exemptions is that if we have a positive COVID case among any staff or students in that school, whether they're physically present or not, that also shuts down that exception option for 14 days. So it's 14 days from either start of symptoms or test date, depending on whichever comes first. So that's another hindrance to our exception process that's going to kind of get in the way too as we start to think about that.
And is that also true if you open? So once you open, if at any point in time you have a positive case,
correct,
then everything closes for that school or for the entire district?
For that school.
Okay.
Yeah, the other challenge with the Benton County, Lynn County piece is that we have more than 10% of our staff that come to us from Benton County. And when you do that, when that ratio is hit, you have to then look at the metrics of the county that the staff are coming from as well. So there's complexity with the fact that we have folks living and going to school from both counties. So when we look at that, we see that October 19th will not be the start date for K3. We are able to make that decision now because we have to have 3 weeks in a row, and we're 3 weeks away. So we will not be able to make that decision. We won't have the data to make that decision actually until October 19th. And so what we are looking at are the calendar chunks of time, prioritizing that we want our kids in school as soon as we can and for uninterrupted time, right? We want it to be a meaningful amount of time. And so when we look at that, we see that following the 19th, I think beginning the 26th, I'm sorry, I just don't have my calendar pulled up. I have 2 different screens up and I still can't get the calendar up. But starting at that date, we can get 3 pretty solid weeks of school in if the data turns around and if we were to meet the metrics for 3 weeks solid in a row prior to Thanksgiving. Our hope would be that we could get at least 3 weeks in with K3 before then. If we can't, then I think it is likely, and I would recommend that we discuss as a district, and we don't need to do this for 2 more weeks, so it's something I'd like you as a board to be considering, that the next juncture would then be the 3 weeks after Thanksgiving and before winter break, and trying to get 3 solid weeks in of K-3 during that period of time. One of the things we know and have heard from our families is we want our kids back in school, and we want consistency and predictability, because there are many things that are leveraged upon kids going back to school. And part of that is childcare, and part of that is work schedule, et cetera. So we want to make sure that once we're open, we're able to do it for a chunk of time that's uninterrupted. If neither of those 2 groups work, then we're looking at after the first of the year, which is time is just passing very quickly. We know, to pivot away from elementary or early elementary, we know that 4th through 12th grade, for those kids to go to school, we need to meet the metrics of 10, fewer than 10. And we've only met that one time in one of our counties since metrics started being tracked in July. Fewer than 10 cases per 100,000 and a less than 5% positivity rate. And I think it is highly unlikely that that will happen before the end of this calendar year, before the end of December, which means it is much, I think the most likely first date back for at least middle and high school students. Well, and it would be 4th through 12th in this case, but at least middle and high school students would be the semester, which is the end of January. We could bring 4th and 5th grade, if the data changes, back right when kids get back in January, because it won't be as problematic as grading is for secondary students to bring them back at the end of a semester. But I needed to let you all know the gravity of what the metrics are saying right now, and the impact these numbers have on our ability to work with our students in person. And I cannot overstate the desire of everybody on our staff to have kids back in school. We want to be working with our kids in school safely. We want it to be a safe scenario, and we want to do everything we can to support that. And we do know that we have family members who are definitely working as hard as they can to try and make this work within their family units, and that it's getting extraordinarily more and more difficult. But I wanted to make sure that you're aware.
You do have a couple of questions. Director Ward first.
Thank you. Thanks for bringing us up to date on that, Melissa. It's sobering news indeed. I also hear the desire from the community, my own family, to get back to school. And if the metrics allow us to bring K-3 back at the beginning of November, that would be awesome. You did talk about consistency though, and we have a number of days scheduled to be out of school in November, with Veterans Day and some other days even before Thanksgiving. Do you see that as problematic at all?
I think when we looked at November today, we really felt like that by and large, the number of instructional days would be worth it. That the disruptions would not be significant enough to merit not going forth with that plan. Waiting another month unnecessarily seemed to staff to be unnecessary if we can avoid it.
Okay, thank you.
And then you also had Director Aganaga.
So I was just checking on, I know we're going to get to contracts here in a little bit, but checking on the availability of the staff, how flexible they can be. Say if you're a second grade teacher, going, maybe from your house back to your office and teaching in person, but maybe you have a 4th and 5th grader student that you've been teaching at the same time. How flexible I'm just kind of a little concerned.
I appreciate the concern for staff, and it's certainly something that we discussed as we looked at the MOUs that we negotiated with the unions, and the unfortunate reality is there is flexibility that we're able to grant right now in the current environment because we don't need staff to be physically present on the ground at the schools yet, right? But there will come a time, and there may come a time when staff will need to be present in person. The advantage that we have with elementary school certification is that, well, we have two advantages, two things working to our advantage. One is we know that we have a group of our students who are still going to wish to continue in the distance learning model even after we allow that return. And so we have, we know that there are slots for teachers in the situation you described, where they might be able to then work with students who are still at home. The other advantage to elementary teaching is that you can, if you're a third grade teacher, teach at fifth grade, and if you're a fifth grade teacher, teach at third grade. And so there may be circumstances where we would ask people to teach out of their grade level that they're most comfortable in for some time while we make that transition in order to allow more flexibility for staff. We've really been focused a lot on how do we support our employees as family members as well as employees. So thank you for asking that.
And I had one quick question. So even if we manage to get through a 3-week period of time and we open in November, let's say, for that 3 weeks, if our numbers as a county, either county, increase back up over that metrics, does that force us to then close and go back to distance learning at that point in time?
So, and correct me if I'm wrong, Rachel, but what I believe happens is that first week that you are planning to stop instruction the following week. I think that's correct. And if those metrics come back, there could be an opportunity, but I'm not clear on that. I can't even think that far because we haven't been there yet. Go ahead, Rachel.
Yes, if we hit that 30, we have to transition to comprehensive distance learning. Anytime we hit over 20 for those K-3 exemptions, we have to plan to transition back to virtual learning. So it's a pretty quick turnaround once we hit that 30, and it's pretty much always going to be on a Monday afternoon that we'll learn about that.
And when
and we
we
can
hit
kind
that,
of guesstimate the numbers we see.
yeah, and if we hit that 30, then it's from that point forward at least another 3 weeks that we have to be down from there. Yeah. So there's always an opportunity
Exactly.
for a back and forth situation, unfortunately. I think that's important because I think our families need to understand that even though we're saying, hey, here's a 3-week period of time that we're going to assume we're going to be back for, it's not a guarantee at any given time, because if those numbers go up, we're still going to be limited by that. And so I think as families are planning, they need to have a clear understanding that that at any point in time, the entire district, if we're not as a county meeting, will have to then revert back. So yeah, okay.
Appreciate that.
Yep, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions on the metrics?
I do see Director Aganaga again, yes.
So I just do want to explain though, because Colt Gill has been working with a lot of the private schools, the director of OSBA, and because private schools are going in person K-3 right now, and Lynn County did go over their numbers this week. But OSBA, or I'm sorry, ODE is working with school districts not to actually just close them on that day they break the 3-week under 30. There is a lot of exemptions being made. They actually haven't pulled anybody back to online once they've already started in person, to my knowledge.
So, yeah, so just a quick correction. So Colt is the head of the Department of Education, which is where you ended up, yeah. So my understanding is that we would have several days, really 2 to 3 days in order to close that. And I wish we could get in a situation where we would have the scenario of needing to have the discussion about whether or not we need to close. So what our first step is to get folks in. The exceptions that the Department of Education have made have largely been around rural communities. Director Eastman referenced that earlier, some of the exceptions that have been made around certain zip codes, particularly in Eastern Oregon, but also rural communities, even extending here into Lynn County. and in Benton County as well, in order to bring students to school in those areas. So we have yet to see any exceptions be made in larger communities the size of Albany.
Sure, I forwarded you the email, so it could be some more information for you.
Thank you. And that is all I have for you tonight. Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you. I don't see any additional questions here, so we will go to board liaison reports. Were there any? How about we throw out board liaison reports, board member reports, any of the above? Some of us haven't had a lot of activities going on, so Director Eastman.
Well, as you're going to find out a little later, we did have a bargaining session, and I won't talk about that specifically, but I would like to comment on the professionalism and everybody in the room being an adult. And it's been a real pleasure to be involved in those bargaining sessions. Everybody has treated everyone else with a lot of respect, and I have been very impressed.
Thank you for representing us there too. All right. If there are no others, I will head into our student board member reports, and only because I see her first in my screen. Esperanza, why don't you go ahead and give us an update? How's school going?
School in general, the classes are going very well right now, at least in my point of view, and some of the other students feel like teachers are doing really well with presenting can't even think of it, the courses right now. But what a lot of them are worried about is mental health, because being home all day, staying on a screen, not leaving your house, all those things are becoming a huge issue for my peers. They're getting depressed. They don't want to leave their bed because they don't have to. But I was doing some research, and there was a situation in Texas where schools set up a 30 to 45-minute period where either counselors or educated teachers would open their mailbox, I don't know how they did it, but Zoom classes or something, and students were allowed to go and vent about their social lives and their emotional health, because they aren't leaving their houses. They don't have anyone to talk to except family, and sometimes that can get very overwhelming at times. And was just liking to put that out there, maybe in the future if someone could set that up. Online school, I feel like students aren't getting one-on-one time with teachers a lot. Students aren't getting the one-on-one time with the teachers that they need. I know that isn't an immediate fix right now, just because of how things are set up and the time that we are allowed to have in what the courses that need to be presented for the students to actually learn what they need to learn. Especially for AP classes, it's just a lot put on the students that they need to get through. And I got a lot of complaints about the bell schedule that was first put out, but the new one that was put out, I haven't gotten anything for. So that's a good thing. I asked a lot of the students to actually go on the live, so hopefully they're understanding why it needs to be put that way. I don't know if someone wants to put out why we need certain periods of time in classes, and why you can't have a 30-minute break in between each class, just because. So if someone wants to explain that would be great for the students to hear.
I would love to, thank you so much. And I would love to have Assistant Superintendent Harlan answer this question. She and Secondary Director Carrie Tatum and I spent a lot of time having conversations at the end of last week. Principal Hunter and Principal Osborne in particular were interested in the schedule. I know Principal Osborne, I think, had created a draft schedule that was different than what we ended up releasing on Friday. I will say one of the, I love Esperanza, you got it right from the beginning, right? You're like, why can't we have 30 more minutes of downtime? Well, because you can't lose that much instructional time in a week. So, so looking at how do we balance what we heard from students and staff. And so Lisa can go ahead and answer that for you.
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and one I'm glad you brought up. One of the things that I was really pleased to hear is that it sounds like Esperanza students and staff from West got a survey around kind of how things were going at the beginning of the week. And I wish that that would have been better communicated amongst the schools in the district, because I would have loved for South students and South staff to have the same opportunity at taking a survey to say kind of how are things going. So the high school schedule originally, I think we got a little bit of the cart before the horse and had gone out to staff before the district office had approved it and had a chance to talk with some of our other stakeholders around what that means. We're really trying hard to balance instructional time, synchronous and asynchronous. And so the secondary schools actually, before you all came back to school, sat down to look at and define what is synchronous and what is asynchronous. So the expectation, and we have those, and it might be actually good for students to see. So you bringing this up makes me think about that. Like, do students know what that means? And have we shown them the work that kind of we did before they got here? And so we know that students aren't on synchronously with their teachers for 80 minutes, and we wouldn't expect that, right? Like, that's a long time to sit in front of a screen and try to absorb new information. And we know that's not what's happening. We're hopefully trying to do our best kind of activities discussion with students on screen, and then have you guys do some practice work and follow up kind of off. And so I think the balance is, when we talk with the parent forums around for each level, balancing what you all need for credits in high school, remembering that your teachers are now feeling a ton of pressure, taking a course that used to be a semester and squishing it into a quarter, and the pace that that requires, right? And balancing that with making sure everybody gets kind of those brain breaks and up and physical activity. So I think for us, having an approach as a district that it includes not only West, but includes South and includes kind of everybody across the level, especially now that we're virtual learning and things look different, is going to be really important. And just trying to meet kind of the needs of everybody involved, including you as students, and making sure that you get electives and that you get your core content and that you get courses that you can get credit for in high school is really important. So super apologize for the miscommunication. I think that the high schools got out communicating something before it had been decided. I think they were just excited. And just look forward to your all's perception as students in the system and what that will, how things are going and what we can do kind of better in the future. I love the suggestion of the kind of 45 minutes, or, we could come up with what that's called, but I think that has a lot of potential. So
thank you. And I want to add to your question about one-on-one time with teachers. I actually think part of that is just getting better with the tools that we have and teachers feeling a little bit more confident. So as we break kids out into, Zoom rooms, how we break you guys out into little small groups, we can break you out so that we have some singular meetings with folks too. So we can assign one student to a Zoom room and we can go over and have a communication with them. Is learning how to use that tool. I am thinking that Assistant Superintendent Harlan's point about, gosh, I'm not sure we ever really shared with you guys, the students, what is the difference between synchronous and asynchronous? Like, one of the things we talked to staff about is we don't want more than 10 minutes of direct instruction happening at a time, right? Because we want you guys to be able to apply and have conversation with other kids, or have some downtime, right, to do work. And so we will go ahead and share that out with all of you. That was a great suggestion. Thank you.
I do, just from, I have, obviously have a couple high school ones here, but I have heard in not eavesdropping, but overhearing conversations with their teachers, that the teachers, some of them have been explaining that, I think, in some of the classes too, and have been trying to share hey, this is our synchronous time, this is our non, and been trying to do that. And I know from my daughter's experience, she's got an AP class, and she reached out, and it was me kind of urging her, but I said, just reach out to the teacher via messaging and see what you know, what happens. And the teacher immediately responded and said, hey, I've got this amount of time at this point, you know, to meet one-on-one and talk about things. So I think part of it is also just letting the students know it's more important than ever just to reach out and send a message, and the teachers will be responsive when they can to be able to give you that time. They do have that time sort of built in, each one of them at different places, to be able to have those conversations with students too. So I think part of that is just exactly what you said, making sure the students know what they can do, and that they're, you know, we want them to reach out. And I do think the mental health issue is a big deal, and we need to find a way to ensure that people are reaching out and have a place for that to occur as much as we can. Yeah.
I should have given an update on that in my report, and I will share with you that we had the superintendents in this local area. We all met last week to discuss our rising concerns around student mental health. So we have a number of actions that we're taking and things that we're exploring, including how do we use the limited in-person time that we were talking about earlier to run some counseling groups for kids who may have common areas of concern, where typically you would do that if you were at school anyway. So how can we do that by providing transportation and have that happen at school? And also looking at things like telehealth and how we might be able to access some mental health specialists for students who, in addition to working with counselors, and your idea was spot on, that's fantastic. How do we also have additional, more intensive supports for kids?
So Esperanza, did you have additional updates or questions or information? Okay. And welcome, LJ.
Hello.
Excited to have you. Thanks for joining us. So we'll go ahead and let you give your update and perspective of how things are going.
Awesome. So yes, I agree. The teachers are doing a phenomenal job making this as smoothly as possible for the students. All the teachers, my teachers and my friends' teachers that I've talked to they've all been having great experiences with getting assignments out on time and tests and stuff. I would agree that the schedule today was a lot better than last week, because we did that survey last week, I believe, a survey that students could answer a couple questions like what is going good for you and what is going bad for you. And a lot of the negatives were like students' downtime is mostly spent on screens, like either it's like social media or video games. So a lot of it was like students are doing school all day on screens and then going like into their like playing video games after, or just more screen time. So having those breaks in between the classes where you can like do your work without being on a screen is perfect. And I've only heard positive responses to it. One thing that my teachers have done is they've stayed on the Zoom for the rest of the class time and have said you can leave the Zoom, and if you have any questions, you can come back and they'll help you through that. And that's been super helpful for me. Like just going back and they'll be like, they could pull you off to like a breakout room and you can one-on-one ask them a question and then you can go off the Zoom again. So that's been super helpful. I would encourage all teachers to do that, to stay on the Zoom until the end of class so students can come back and ask those questions that they have. And another question that I have is for Wednesdays. So we have the advisory schedule from 9 to 9:30. I was wondering if it is allowed for teachers to hold like office hour type deals on Zoom during those days of independent work where students could pop in and ask a couple questions. Zoom just works better than emails when it comes to like questions for work and trying to explain stuff. So is there like a rule against teachers having those office hours on Wednesdays?
That's such a great question, LJ, and I'll give you two answers, yes and no. So one rule is that teachers have a right to a prep time, and a lot of teachers at the high school actually are not getting a prep because of the schedule that they're running right now. So they're teaching every class period right now. in order to keep class sizes small and to still offer all of the course variety that you have, for example, that you have at West. So in that respect, yes, we have to keep that time protected. For teachers who may be getting a prep during those other days, then the answer is kind of a qualified no. There aren't rules. However, teachers would need to be giving up time that they may be that they currently are either scheduling as part of their prep. So they do have a little bit of time every Wednesday that they have set aside for prep. But also then we can't have them missing their professional learning community time. That's when they're working with their peers who are teaching the same subjects or teaching different subjects, teaching the next grade level perhaps of the same subject, to build their lesson plans and figure out what is the best way to implement that set of lessons over the course of the next week. And then on top of that, there's also time for professional development for teachers. And there may be times on a Wednesday where a teacher doesn't have all that time constructed, it isn't all filled, and they may choose to say, you know what, I can see 30 minutes in my schedule here that I would want to open up. But I can tell you that for the most part, their Wednesdays are pretty scripted with work that they're either doing to plan for you guys for teaching, for learning, or learning that they need to do themselves, like learning how to use Zoom well, or how to use Canvas effectively, or how do you in this block schedule where you're teaching a semester's worth of material in a quarter, how do you jam all of that together, right? So it is a lot of pressure on them on Wednesdays it's pretty scheduled, I guess is what I'd say.
Perfect. That's just what I needed. That's all I have for now.
It seems a little strange. I don't know if the other board members agree that we're not hearing all these other activity, results and things. It's a little strange. Normally we hear all about football and soccer and volleyball, everything else going on this time of year. So we'll get there. Thank you both for your updates. We don't have, again, any community or committee or school presentations, although I understand, and I just want to mention that I think we will be getting back to some of those as we move forward. So we will have some things coming to us, I think, from our regular schedule of kind of the annual presentations of things that we wanted to see that might look a little different this year. But I know that we've been talking in our pre-planning sessions about bringing some of those things back. So we may, in the near future, have some things in there as well. And Director Eastman, did you have a question?
I just want to say welcome to AJ. Nice to see you here. And I do have a question. Both student reps were talking about the schedules. Are the high school schedules aligned at this point?
So LJ, so the high schools, well, this is a good question for LJ and Esperanza. What are your schedules? And we will have the answer.
So like what classes am I taking, or?
No, just kind of what's the time schedule of your day?
Okay, so my first period is from 8 to 9:20, I believe. But the last 30 minutes are asynchronous. And then the next class is 9:30 to 10:50, yes. And then lunch is from 10:50 to 11:50. And then 11:50 to 1:10, I believe. And then 1:20 to 2:40. I believe that's what it is.
Thanks, LJ. I guess more specifically, are the two high schools aligned in their scheduled day? In other words, do they do things at the same time every day?
Yes. Yeah. So, and I answer that, Director Eastman, and thank you, LJ. And I saw Esperanza nodding her head. I'm not sure if the last 30 minutes of each of those periods is the same at South as what West has said. Right. I think we have left that up to individual teachers to identify the time within their learning blocks that they want to have asynchronous. So Esperanza may have had a different experience with that, but the time periods that LJ talked about are exactly the same at South.
Thank you. Oh, one other quick question. When we get back to whatever normal is in the future, when we have students back in buildings, will we be able to keep the South and West schedules aligned? I know that was a problem in the past when we had discussions about CTE and possibly using Lynn Benton as an asset.
I would say that of course we can do that. And I think that one of the assets of the model has been to have subject area teachers, content area teachers be able to plan effectively across the system with each other, knowing that the length of the course period is going to be the same length, et cetera. So I wouldn't anticipate any reason not to do that.
And I just want to say, nice job, LJ. You rattled off that schedule without any problem. That was great, especially since it just changed. All right. So let's see. I think that moves us into comments from the public. And we do have 2 this evening. And Vice Chair Thompson is going to read those. And then I do want to have a quick conversation at the end about our process for these going forward. So
yeah, real quick, I cranked up the volume eternally. Is that too much?
Yeah, too much. Maybe shrink it down a little bit.
Hang on.
Careful what you ask for, huh?
Yeah.
Let's split the difference here. And okay.
Perfect.
Yeah, here we go. Public comment number 1. Kevin Fanderm, 4235 Thoroughbred Avenue Southeast here in Albany. Dear chairpersons and directors, I appreciate your time and consideration. My wife, Amy, and I have a 16-year-old son whom attends West Albany High School. I want to take a moment and provide some feedback from not just my family, but others in the community whom I've spoken with regarding our school resource officers. School resource officers are advanced trained police officers. Their specialized training allows them to build bonds with students and staff in the school communities. They are a part of the state Oregon School Resource Officers Association, as well as National School Resources Officers. Are you aware of these organizations? Do you know their mission statements? And he describes the mission statements. The Oregon School Resource Officers Association is comprised of dedicated professionals committed to providing service, training, and support to our school communities by fostering safe, secure, and healthy learning environments for our youth. The National Association of School Resource Officers is dedicated to providing the highest quality of training to school-based law enforcement officers to promote safer schools and safer children. NASRO is an organization for school-based law enforcement officers, school administrators, and school security safety professionals working as partners to protect students, faculty, and staff, and the school community. I believe a misconception by the general public is that school resource officers are just cops. They don't have any additional training. They don't have any additional skill sets. The general public stereotypes these officers through the media's eyes. How has the Albany Police Department and the Greater Albany Public School District educated the public on our school resource officers? What events have been fostered to create the open and trusting environment that I know we all want to see? School resource officers are vital in the school to increase safety, work as a team with the school staff to address concerns and school concerns and subject matter experts from the law enforcement field. Goes on in terms of student threat assessment, anti-bullying task force, suicide prevention task force, and the sexual incident response committee. Do you know what special training and skills your school resource officers possess? Has the board or superintendent spent any time talking to them? They are individuals, they are human beings. I have a concern that our Albany Police School resource officers are being painted with a broad brush. They are being characterized by the criminal behavior of officers in other parts of the country. We can't judge a whole group of people based on the misdeeds of a few. Let's talk about an officer whom I know very well, Ken Van Derm. Ken Van Derm grew up here in the Greater Albany Public School District, the son of a retired school teacher. He graduated from West Albany High School in 1991, graduated from Western Oregon University in 1997 with a Bachelor's of Science in Criminal Justice and a minor in Spanish. He lived in Puebla, Mexico for several months while becoming immersed in the Spanish language. He speaks fluent Spanish. This has allowed him to bridge the communication gap with members of the Hispanic community. Ken Van Derm was certified in presenting the drug abuse resistant education curriculum in the Greater Albany Public Schools for several years. The mentoring and relationships he has formed with young students from that time has lasted until the present day. Just last night, I had one of his former students reaching out to me for his help on a problem. Another interesting note is that he received a life-saving award last year for risking his own safety to save a community member in crisis who tried to commit suicide. In closing, I believe the Albany Public School resource officers are unique individuals providing specialized support to the Greater Albany Public School staff and most importantly, our students. Albany Police Department school resource officers help provide safety and security for our students and staff and visitors. They are a necessary resource for our district. And item number 2, public comment number 2 is from Chris Schubert, 2918 Cosner Road Northeast in Albany. Number 1, can all teachers post all work for the day or even the week so kids can work at their own pace? I find my kids losing interest really fast due to all the instructions by the teacher. And point 2, I've been told by different teachers that working ahead is okay, but the same teachers tell me the child must be present in class. Why would a child, let alone an adult, work ahead if present in the classroom is required? Specifically if the child is behind and can utilize his time better. That is all the comments we received.
Thank you, Vice Chair Thompson. As always, we get our comments from the public up until noon, the day of our meetings, and sometimes they come in right at noon. And so part of our process is to hear those in the meeting, and we most often don't have discussion about those in the meeting, but we do look into those afterwards and have appropriate responses and discussions. I wanted to make a comment and ask our board members at this time. There's been a few board members who have asked about the possibility of not necessarily taking the time to read all of the public comments verbally in our online virtual meetings. So I just wanted to put that out for discussion. We do not have a requirement to take public comment in person in meetings and or to read them aloud during our virtual meetings. We do, however, have an obligation to receive and read and review and accept and acknowledge our acceptance of those messages or concerns from folks. And so a question had been raised about whether going forward we could, like we had these posted to our board book prior to the meeting, that we could review those ourselves and in our meeting acknowledge the person and the topic, and in general that the board has reviewed them and will continue to further discussions about them as appropriate or assign tasks appropriately to look into things and respond. Do any of you have questions or concerns or thoughts about whether or not that's something we would want to pursue for our meetings going forward, at least while we're virtual? I do see a hand up from Director Eastman first, and then I see yours also, Director Thompson. So
I would feel quite comfortable in continuing to have letters from the public read. We are public representatives, and I think that the public should have the opportunity to address us. The only time I think I would have any objection is if we were to receive repetitive comments of the same exact nature, or letters that are exactly the same. In other words, if we're just getting email bombed, I don't know if that's the right terminology or not, but if we were to get a large number of identical emails, I think we could read one and then attach the names. And of course, there's all the other normal. It's got to be nice and not call out anybody in specific. Those kinds of things that we would normally do at a regular board meeting. So I have no problem with reading the comments.
okay, Vice Chair Thompson.
Yeah, I brought up the idea. I got it from an OSBA webinar recently about running meetings, and it was suggested some boards are doing this in this virtual environment, and it was the presenter who felt that is just. Here's the thing: we've only gotten a couple last few times. I think if we got 4 or 5, it just adds time to an already these meetings. An hour or 2 hours in this setup is just much more. It's much more taxing. It's a much longer meeting than even 2 or 3 hours at a regular in-person meeting. And I am reading the statement.
I think we lost you, Director Thompson. So while we're trying to engage him back, I also had Director Ward had a comment.
We get comments occasionally. We get comments throughout the week. Anyone can reach any of us very easily. I understand. I think the best argument for having this is that it brings it up to the public, so everyone hears the comments. So I get that. But if there was some way to acknowledge that we heard and listened to their comments, I just think that would be much better. At the end of the day, it's our meeting. This is the public meeting of the Albany School Board, and like you said, because of that fact, there is no requirement to have anyone. And I'm not, I'm flat out saying I'm not denying anybody. You can call me anytime. My number, and I have been called. My number's on this website. Please do. I certainly would. I have lobbied my local officials, and I just call them. I just email them. I just think it hasn't been that bad, but if we got 4 or 5 that were separate, like if they were all on the same subject, it's easy to say that we've had a number on some subject or a number that sound alike. That's easy to say. But if we got 4 or 5 distinct, it just adds to time that I just don't think is necessary, because I don't think any of us would not read, would not deal with their concerns. I don't think that happens at all. So there you go. Those are my thoughts, and it's not coming from me. I mean, I got this from OSBA as a kind of a best practice.
And I think there are a lot of boards that are doing that, and there have been several that are no longer even allowing public comments in their in-person meetings. They're doing them all via letter and response, and then acknowledging them in the meeting and then providing them in the minutes. So they still are available for folks to see and read and follow up on. So
I love that idea.
Thank you. Director Ward.
Yeah, I tend to agree with Director Eastman on this. I'm not hearing we do serve the public, and I think in this time where we're meeting virtually, our perhaps our perceived ability, I think it is more difficult for the public to engage with us. And yet I think it's a time where it's most important, maybe more important than ever before, at least in the time that any of us have served on the board, for the public to be able to do that. They have questions, they have concerns, they need answers, they need reassurance. They need and they deserve to know that their elected officials hear them and are taking their considerations seriously. And I don't think there's a replacement for that aside from receiving and acknowledging public comment publicly. The argument that it would save us time is true. It's very rare that we have so many that it makes a huge indent on our meetings, and maybe if we come across a time when that's the case, then we would consider doing something different for that specific meeting. But when we accepted public comment, when we met in person, those were limited to 3 minutes. The ones that are sent to us should be able to be read in 3 minutes, and it would take quite a few to take more than about 15 minutes of our time. And I think especially under the extraordinary circumstances in which we are striving to educate our children and that we're all living in, that we can give the public at least 15 minutes of our time.
Thank you. And Director Aganaga.
Yes, I would also echo Mr. Eastman and Ms. Ward's comments of how it is very important to hear from our constituents that have a vested interest in our school district. Sometimes when we get those phone calls or emails during the week, our only action we can really take is to say, I appreciate you communicating me, but I'm going to forward your information to Superintendent Goff and Assistant Superintendent Harlan. And so to be able to hear them in person, and I think we're even missing part of it because we don't hear the tone or the aspiration that we've heard before. I mean, we've heard people laugh and we've heard people cry at the podium. And but as a caveat, like Ms. Ward said, the city council will get dozens of letters and they'll just say, hey, here's the basis of what we're talking about. And there was 37 letters in opposition and there was 27 in favor. And in those circumstances, I could understand just kind of changing it up. But from our day-to-day business, I think it's important to hear from constituents. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we heard from everyone. So it sounds like general rule will continue with the way we've been handling our public comment with, I hear the caveat of if and when we have a larger quantity that maybe we address those at the time. And I also think we should review them for length of time. And if they fall within the length of time that's allowed normally in our standard meetings of that 3 minutes, we'll read the whole thing. And if not, we'll maybe paraphrase or give a general overview of that particular public comment. And they will always be available through the minutes and things as well. So in their entirety. So it sounds like that's the avenue we will go. And we may just let all of you take a turn at reading them. So how's that? No, I don't think anyone will care. And we will try to do a better job of putting some emotion into it. It's hard because we don't know what that emotion should be sometimes, but we do appreciate the public providing their comments in any fashion. And I think that I want to reiterate, all of us are open and available at any point in time. I just want to clarify on our website, it is by email, not by phone number necessarily. The phone numbers are no longer posted on the website. I believe it's just email. But please email us and we will respond. Typically, the way the board responds is to most things, the board chair will respond on behalf of the board. If things are directed to all of us, not each board member necessarily will respond. And in many cases, we forward it on to the most appropriate level, whether that's an assistant superintendent or superintendent, or one of the board members dealing with a particular topic or issue, like Director Eastman, we would refer people to for anything related to the negotiations and contracts and things like that. So, but we are all open, we are all available, and please reach out to us in any way. But this is another option for folks to be able to send in their comments and concerns, and we hear them. Again, we don't have discussion about them in our meetings for time's sake. However, we do pass those along for review after. So I see also Director Aganaga, you had an additional comment or question? No? Okay. Director Eastman, you did. Yes.
I would be happy to read any of the letters. And I would like to also comment that the letters we do receive, and we do receive a fair number of letters from the public, and staff responds to those very promptly, very accurately, and very sincerely, and I appreciate that. I certainly hope that the patron that sends them in feels the same, because some of the questions are very pointed and sometimes can be very difficult to answer. But staff has done an exceptional job, in my opinion, in responding to those letters in a timely fashion, in an accurate fashion, and in a very honest fashion. So thank you.
All right. Thank you for allowing that discussion. It had just been posed, and we wanted to make sure we went through that and had an outcome. So I appreciate that. Let's see, moving on to, I just extended scrolled beyond where my agenda was, and I apologize. Consent agenda. We had I'm not going to open these up in board book, but we had our personnel and our monthly financial report. Were there any comments or questions about either of those? Not seeing any. So those are approved unanimously. And then we have our old business, which was the budget committee calendar. Did anyone need me to open that up and look at it? Or are we okay? So again, if there's no comments or questions, I am not seeing any. Our budget committee calendar is also approved. And then that brings us to a new report, which is the restraint and seclusion. Is Ryan joining? Oh, did I miss something?
Do we not need to make a motion on the budget committee calendar?
Not on the, am I wrong? Old business? Yes, we do. I apologize. Yes, that's my fault.
No problem. I'll make a motion to accept the proposed 2020-21 budget committee calendar.
Thank you. So there's a motion to accept the proposed 2020-2021 budget committee calendar. Director Eastman.
Aye.
Vice Chair Thompson.
Aye.
Director Aganaga.
Aye.
And Director Ward.
Aye.
And I also vote aye. So now it is approved unanimously. Thank you for that. Sorry. I was just moving right along in the agenda. So restraint and seclusion. And was Ryan joining us?
I thought so, but I don't see. Yes, look at just like.
There he is.
Please excuse his background, but he is here.
we will try to do that.
Go Ducks.
So welcome, thank you, and we will let you take it away, Ryan. Thanks.
Yeah, sorry about the distracting background. I actually forgot I said it, and I don't know it well enough to mess around with it right now and just direct the board meeting further. So I do apologize, but I do wish I was there also. Okay, in your board packet, you have the 1920 Restraint and Seclusion Report, which is an annual report that's required by the state that shows the restraint and seclusions by total incidents, by students, and by demographic. The report needs to be made to you guys. It gets reported to the website and made available to the public on an annual basis. That's pretty much all there is to it. I can take questions though. Oh, actually, I should say this is obvious, but because the year was cut short, the data is not a complete year, right? We missed 2.5 months of data, but it was trending down even prior to that.
Thank you. Director Aganaga.
Sorry, I keep switching back and forth. My iPad's that little hand button is tricky.
Okay.
Mr. Manley, could you kind of give us some scenarios where a seclusion incident would take place and how it is, and also what kind of training our staff gets? Is it annually, biannually? Just spread some information on that for us.
Sure. So you asked specifically about seclusion, and seclusion is extremely rare. And you can see we only had one incident this last year because basically in that particular situation, we had a student that was repeatedly engaging in fairly physical, aggressive activity, and it became to a point where we didn't feel we could keep staff safe. We still needed to provide an education. So we ended up using a seclusion room, which is built. It's actually not, it's a room that exists. It's not a room that was built for that. And the specs match the state specs, although I don't know them by heart. And essentially the student goes in there in order to maintain their safety without putting our staff in further danger. Seclusion is actually not part of the training, but we have what we call Crisis Prevention Institute training, which is restraint training. Staff is trained every other year on that. It's a 2-year certification. We have 3 trainers in the district, and so we tend to, and we have a 1-day and we have a 2-day training. So the 1-day training doesn't actually train on restraining, that's trains on de-escalation techniques, sort of what the process is. And for staff that we know or can predict would be in a situation where they may need to intervene physically in order to keep themselves and others safe, then they go to the 2-day, and then they have that specific training that has the physical component of how to do that in as safe a way as possible. Obviously, we never want to put hands on kids. Our goal is not to do that. Our goal is to get these numbers down to 0, but that's how that training rolls out.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. And I know it's always the last resort. It's the last thing we want to do because, but I know people have been affected by this, and they said that you have handled, or your staff has handled it very professionally. And I mean, the parents are sorry for it. They're not mad at the school. So they're sorry at the incident. So thank you for your professionalism and just following up on those with them.
Thank you.
Were there any other questions or comments about the report, Director Mattingly? Thank you for putting that together for us and for joining us for that topic. It was so quick.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
You too. All right. And so that brings us into our monthly bond report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I know that Director Eastman is disappointed that this is the first time he's been able to hear from me this evening, but I do have David McKay with me, Bond Project Manager. In your packet is the end of month report for August 2020, and I will let David go ahead and give you the highlights, and then we will stand for any questions that the board might have.
And just a real quick reminder, David, as you're going through this, if you could just let me know the page numbers from the actual report itself, if you'd like us to look at one, I'll be sure to bring that up for the group.
Well, Chairperson Butzner, I was prepared, and as I was putting my comments together, I called Russ this afternoon and asked him which page number do I want to reference, and so I am ready and have it organized so I can go through it very linear. So I am I'm a quick student.
I thought you were going to say, David, I was prepared to go on at my usual time, about 9:45.
Yes.
Too early.
Thank you. By the way, I have noticed the board meetings have gotten much quicker. Thank you. So.
Thank you.
Yeah. On page 2 of 87, I'm assuming it is the page number from the report, correct? The one thing I wanted to just highlight is that our social media posts have gone down significantly, but we believe that's because of activity. There's just not as much activity going on, not as many projects. So we were down about 20,000 views last month. We're going to do some things to try to bolster that. I think we have an opportunity in the fall to begin to highlight for the district how the district has fulfilled the bond promise, especially with, like, say, critical facility upgrades, in reviewing all the roof projects that have been done over the last 3 years, to go through the restrooms and repiping, and just do a series of posts to point to the community the fulfillment of the bond promise. And so we're going to start those up and run through the fall and winter. And I think that that'll be helpful in just continuing to communicate the activity, the great activity that the district has done on the projects across the district completely. With that, I'm going to move to Meadow Ridge, and that'll be page 6 of 87. We have just continued to work through a couple of very small mechanical issues there, one on the heating side, one on the cooling side, and we're just continuing to work on that to really get that system dialed in. We had to call in Trane because we had some issues with their cooling tower. They've come in and rectifying it. So it's those, any of you that have ever done a construction project, it's those little last minute things that come up that seem to take the most amount of time. We're just continuing to stay focused on it and make sure that every I is dotted, every T is crossed, and things are complete. The other item, I believe we talked about this a couple months ago, is at the very end of the project, nearing the time when the inspectors are coming through and doing the final inspection of the building, they decided that we needed a second egress path out of the mechanical mezzanine, so on the far east end of the classroom. And so we've been working on putting another ladder in there so that if a fire started in the middle of the mezzanine, the mechanical mezzanine, and somebody was on the east side of that fire, they would have a path of egress out instead of the one that's just on the far west side. So we've been working on that. We're having to coordinate around the principal and the teachers just to make sure noise and dust is down. And so we're continuing to work on that and trying to coordinate around the building and teachers so that we're not a nuisance to them. Oak Grove, page 9 of 87, Kim. The right of way work was approved by Benton County, and they'll be issuing the certificate of occupancy. And then we're continuing to work with Girding on some closeout issues. And hopefully very soon we'll be able to come to you and say final completion has been met. But again, until every I is dotted, every T is crossed, we're going to stay with it to make sure that those things are accomplished. At West Albany High School, I think one of the really kind of profound accomplishments last month was the parking was complete and the bus turnaround. Those are, wait a second. I'm out of sync. I'm going to come back to West. I'm sorry. Memorial and NAMS. That's page 11 of 87. At North Albany Middle School, we were able to finalize that smoke hatch. I believe I talked about that at the last board meeting. And that's done. And so we're about ready to close that one out. And at Memorial, we're just waiting for a final invoice from the commissioning agent. So those will be able to be closed out. Again, I think you can see that Memorial and NAMS were done last year, but we just continue to stay with it until everything is accomplished. South Albany High School, that's page 16 of 87. It's closeout. I mean, I feel like I'm a little bit of a broken record with many of these projects. We're continuing to work on the closeout items there. We've had a few mechanical issues, a few cooling issues. We'll continue to work on getting those completed. We're working with the contractor to make sure that the O&Ms, those are the operation and maintenance manuals, they're critical to Doug and his team being able to operate the building, maintain the building. we're continuing to work with Girding on getting those finalized. We just did a review and sent back a number of comments that they just weren't quite complete yet, and they're working on that for us. The fire, which is page 21 of 87, South Albany Fire. During the acronym TAB is test, adjust, and balance. And what that is that independent third-party testing agency comes in and they test the airflow out of the supplies, and they also test water pressure to the various heating coils. And during that, they found some issues, and the contractor had to come in and repair those. He's come in and repaired those, and so we're going to complete TAB and then commissioning hopefully in September. All right, West. Now I'm back in sync. So West, 24 of 87. One of the first furniture orders went out, and we recently found that the Oregon Correction Enterprises build high quality furniture, almost to any type of specification. We've taken their furniture through rigorous reviews, and they're exceeding everything. And so we were able to make the first order, and are very pleased with that. And so we're continuing to work on the ordering of the rest of the equipment that will be needed. It will be, much of it will be coming from other companies, but this first one for desks and things like tables has been done. And again, we are very, very pleased with their quality and their pricing. Their pricing is just unbeatable. So that's a great win. On 25 of 87, that's a great aerial photo of the courtyard where we're going to be doing the awning, and you can see the retaining wall that has been formed, and they're working in that area to begin the footings and that aspect of the work. So I think that's a good bird's eye view of the courtyard and what will be a great place for students. On page 26 and 32, so those are two. On 26, you see a little bit of the bus turnaround, and then on 32, you see the completion of it. Let's see. It's really that's on page 32, or is really a better, where you see the entire parking lot, bus loop. It's been striped and are ready for cars and students. And then to go back on page 28 and 29, 28 is the first floor of the Commons. You see that beautiful polished concrete floor and the stairs and the learning stairs that have been constructed. And then on page 29, you see the upstairs looking down. The beams have been stained, and the handrails have been painted, and it's really coming to shape. CFU, I can give you on page 39 of 87, that's the fire alarm projects. And I need to catch up on mine, so bear with me. Waverly is complete, and Liberty is nearing completion. And so it'll be great to have both of those fire alarms completed. Page 41, Liberty, Lafayette, and South Albany fire doors. those have made progress. The hurdles that we had with the contractor not wanting to work because of COVID-19, they are working. And south, we're just waiting for some connection to the door control box that's been done, and then the fire marshal inspection and certification. Liberty is the same, and Lafayette has been completed. So that's a great one to be able to have those fire doors behind us. Liberty Mechanical continues to make great progress. I do want to say this, and I'll point something out a little bit later on the GAPS team, but I really want to applaud the GAPS facilities team. They're just doing an incredible job. At some point, it would be great to be able to have you do a tour of Liberty, just because of how much work has been done there, the reorganization of the front entrance. But to go into that boiler room and see the work, it's first class work. And, you know, I've worked with a lot of facility departments around the state. You really have an incredible facility staff, and you've got great tradespepeople that are very conscientious in the work they do. And I just want to really give them a great shout out and applaud them for their work. It's amazing. It's next to none. Many contractors could not have done the quality work that they did on the piping in the mechanical room. And so Liberty continues to proceed. We're working very closely with the administration and just trying to coordinate that. You know, that project stretched. We had lots of challenges at the beginning of the summer. We're working through those, and Bob has been awesome to work with there. I think this is the third school he's been the principal of during the bond. So I guess he's well versed, and that doesn't even include the periwinkle modulars. So yeah, he putting up with us for 3 summers in a row. The roofing projects have done well. The change orders have been minimal, which is great. And probably the project we have been most pleased with roofing was South Albany Roofing, and that was Griffin Roofing. They were just probably one of the best roofing contractors we've worked with. Just didn't complain. They put their heads down and got the job done. So it's been very, very good. And I wanted to just, I will make sure that I have a photo of the boiler room for Liberty in the next board report to show you just what incredible work is being done there by your team. So that's my report. Any questions? No. Okay.
I am not seeing any. None. Thank you.
You bet. Have a great night.
You too. All right. And we are on to our new business, which is the classified contract agreement. Director Larry, I believe, has taken this one.
Chair Butzner and members of the board, thank you. You know, we're a very large organization. We have over 9,000 students. We have over 1,100 employees. And while there is a lot going on around the district, around facilities, and we hear a lot about technology these days, when push comes to shove, we are a people-oriented business, and our people are our most valuable asset in this business. And we're very, very fortunate to have very positive collaborative relationships with our employee associations, both our certified association and our classified association. And this is due to a lot of factors, in part our long history of collaboration with those bodies, also the leadership of each of the associations through the certified association with Lindsay, Jansen Hostetler and her team, and with the Classified Association with President Helen Jacobs and her team. We were very fortunate, as Director Eastman said earlier, to be able to meet with them last week and come to a tentative agreement on a 1-year contract. The essence of this 1-year agreement is that we made an economic settlement, and we will be needing to bargain with this association next time around. At the last executive session that we held, I believe it was 2 weeks ago, we outlined the offer that we were going to make to the association. After some discussion last week, we agreed to those terms with them. Basically, what we had said to them in the process of that bargaining session was that we were offering them as close as we could to the same terms as our other employee groups. And we came to agreement that evening. After the fact, after close examination of the terms with their team, they came back to us and asked us to consider a small adjustment in the TSA ratios, which we did agree to. And so instead of one set of numbers, $25 and $35 for the TSAs, we needed to change in order to keep our word that what we were offering them was substantively similar to the certified and administrator groups. And we came to an agreement on 35 and 22. So the lower group of people who don't work as many hours went down $3, and the upper group of people who work more hours went up $2. A small change, but I did want to bring that to your attention this evening. As I am going to request that even though this is new business this evening, we would like to move that to a vote at the request of the associations this evening. The association, GAACE.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments from any of the directors? Director Eastman, did you have any additional comments to bring in as our representative on that committee?
Oh, I think Mr. Larry did an excellent job in laying it out. And so you can see this, his professionalism and the professionalism of the union was remarkable. And if nobody else has any questions, I would be prepared to make a motion.
That would be great. Thank you. Sounds like we are entertaining a motion.
I'd like to make a motion to ratify the classified contract agreement.
So there's a motion on the table to ratify the classified contract agreement. Director Eastman.
Aye.
Director Aganaga.
Aye.
Director Ward.
Aye.
And Vice Chair Thompson.
Aye.
And I also vote aye. So we have a new ratified contract agreement. Thank you for that. Yay.
Thank you.
Thank you for all your work, both of you, on that. Among others, I know there's a lot of people that are involved in that process. So thanks to everyone for that. I think that concludes our business for the evening. I do have one request. I think Chris is still on the call. If there is a way for us to add an item after other business before we adjourn, that is just maybe our upcoming calendar of meetings and events, so we can do a quick review of the next upcoming meetings since we don't have the actual agenda in front of us.
It is.
Did I miss
It is
that?
listed under N, under adjourn.
Oh, it is. See, I didn't click on that thinking it wouldn't have anything. Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So upcoming dates of interest. October 1st is our bond oversight meeting. These are all virtual at this point, 6:30 p.m. October 2nd is our pre-planning at 8 a.m. And I believe that is Director Aganaga and myself. Is that accurate? Yes, I believe so. Okay. And then our regular board meeting on October 12th at 7 p.m. And we have our retreat at 5:30 on the 19th. And then again, a regular board meeting at 7 p.m. on the 26th. Are there any questions or things? We will have more information about the retreat coming out as we get closer. All right. I don't see any other hands. So again, welcome, LJ. We're glad to have you. Thank you, Esperanza, for joining us and staying for the whole meeting. We appreciate that from both of you. And we will adjourn at 8:40 p.m. Thanks, everyone.
And no comments from Mr.